Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Lancaster Community Library. I'm Alice Cooper, the director, and we're so excited that you're here for our fifth program in our Special Evening with series. And we are with one of our favorite partners, the Lancaster Virginia Historical Society. So I will mention that our last program in the series will be next Tuesday night at 6:30, and Doug Mock will give a presentation on the benefits of art education for children. He's a former director of the RAL Art Center, and he had his own art education business in Richmond that became a franchise. So I hope you'll come and see him as well. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Karen Hart from the Lancaster Historical Society to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. I'm very pleased that we have been able to co-host 3 of the summer's programs with the Lancaster Community Library and make sure we have a good representation of history and heritage going on in the summer programming. And we're very pleased to have Pixie, the mysterious E. Curry, here tonight. You'll hear probably more about that. And I'm not going to say too much because she will share some of her life experiences as we go through tonight's program. But really, she has a background, a life background from right here in Lancaster and Northumberland growing up. Now lives in Richmond, has a long career history of working in various media and public television, radio, theater, dance, or interpretive things. Would you say that? Interpretive drama? Okay. Yeah, drama. And so she brings a lot of knowledge to the table and has been putting those 2 loves of her home place and that background together to create a new website called A Pixie from Kilmarnock, that she has gone out and interviewed a lot of interesting people talking about the people, places, and history of the Neck and some of the up-and-coming history makers in our communities today. And what I think is a great connection for us at the Lancaster Historical Society is we have a similar collection from about 25 years ago, some interviews that were done. So seeing what can be done with today's technology really gives us some inspiration on how to bring that project back out and use some of the past interviews and think about how we might go forward and maybe hopefully getting some new ideas and partnerships with Pixie. But if you're interested, if you go to our website, you can see some programs that we did during pandemic that took some of the clips from audio from different people and put them together in talking about some different topics of history on the Neck. So I encourage you to take a look at that, especially after you see some inspiration tonight. But I'm going to turn it over to Pixie and let her tell you all about the stories, collecting and sharing the stories of the Northern Neck.
A program about the people, places, and the history of the Northern Neck of Virginia. I'm your host, Pixie E. Curry.
I worked for the Daily Press there. At that time, white family-owned newspaper. While I was at the top of my class and had excellent grades, they would not put me in the newsroom. They put me in the circulation with the promise that I would get in the newsroom. And after 2 years, I'm like, okay, I saw other people get hired in the newsroom. There's something wrong here. And that's when I decided I need to continue to pursue my education in order to continue to improve my life.
So when I went for my interview with my counselor, he told me that this curriculum was too difficult for me. It just changed the whole track of at that time, my life, because I just didn't understand that, why it was too hard for him. But he didn't look at my grades from high school. He didn't look at my SAT scores. He just looked at me and said it was too hard.
All of a sudden, just this big, like, I can't even describe the noise, but it sounded like a big, like a big vacuum, like something just sucked the air out of the room.
The Vietnam War had heated up. We'd gotten very much involved in the Vietnam War. This was 1966. They were mobilizing troops and sending more and more troops to Vietnam, and they needed more men. And those guys who were deferred from
ourselves. Same thing with me teaching at the University of Nebraska. I need to see myself as have colleagues that look like me, have students that look like me. We all need representation.
I remember one year, my dad leased a big farm in the county. One night, we parked the equipment, all the tractors and everything were parked together. We went home that night. When we came back the next morning, we had the tractors were shot up, windows were busted out. So that act of vandalism, in which we saw other people riding up and down the road, and we kind of had an idea who that might have been. But we knew we weren't welcomed in that town and that farm community then.
These are just a few of the stories you can hear on A Pixie from Kilmarnock. Thank you for listening. Please consider donating.
I'm so overwhelmed by seeing so many faces here. I'm just so blessed to see all of you, and I just want to thank you for being here, and not only the people here, but the people who are joining by the live feed that is being co-hosted by the Lancaster Historical, the Lancaster, okay, here we go. I'm so overwhelmed. The Lancaster, Virginia Historical Society and the Lancaster Community Library. So as said, I am Pixie E. Curry, and I am the host and the producer of the audio series A Pixie from Kilmarnock, and the creator of the website apixiefromkilmarnock.com. I attended both Lancaster County and Northumberland County public school systems. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University and Thomas Nelson Community College, which is now Virginia Peninsula Community College. And I also attended Virginia State University, Christopher Newport University, and Hampton University. And as they stated, I also worked in public media, working with the radio and the television, and I worked in film and theater, and worked with concerts and festivals, and some of the positions that I held were director's assistant, floor manager, floor director, production assistant, production manager, production coordinator. I also worked as a studio facilitator and producer, and also as a stage liaison, and lots of other roles that's generally associated with the entertainment and production industry. So let's get rolling here. So our family was living in Kilmarnock on the Lancaster side, and then later we moved to Kilmarnock on the Northumberland side. And we lived in the area in Lancaster, what is a dividing line between Kilmarnock and Whitestone. And those who are familiar, that's the place where the Fleece Bay Road and where Boys Camp Road is. So, right? So, if y'all had the opportunity to read Dr. James E.C. Norris's book, Fight on My Soul, which is about his dad, Dr. Morgan E. Norris, who was the first Black physician for the Northern Neck, that there's an illustration in the book that shows where the Norris's family and where Morgan E. Norris School was. So in the illustration, there's this store, Mr. Tolson's store. And on the other side was the Norris's ancestral burial site. And between those 2 points, there used to be a group of homes there. But they're not there any longer because Route 3, which is Murray Ball Road, expanded to a dual highway. So all of that land was appropriated. So it's just a nice memory of living there. But I attended Morgan E. Norris from the first to the third grade, and we would walk to school. And one of the things that happened as we would walk to school, there was buses that would come to exchange the kids that lived on the Fleet Bay Road. They would take the grade school kids and put them on one bus, and the high school kids would be on the other bus. So while the bus was waiting and we were walking to school, the white kids would hang their heads out of the windows and call us niggers. So we and my brother at the time, who was doing the first and second grade, we decided like, okay, we're going to go further down the road and cross over so we didn't have to be accosted like this. But it wasn't like we was invisible because they saw us and they were still calling us that name. And after a while, it just was, you know, tearing us down. I mean, after all, we're in the first and second grade, we're babies. So we made the decision to tell our mother. And anyone who knows my mom knows it. She gave us permission. She empowered us to take control of what was happening to us. So, after walking and enduring all of this abuse, the next time they stuck their heads out of the windows to call us this name, my brother and I, we just took these rocks and we started popping some heads. Yes, we did, and we was trying to hurt someone. So the bus driver, you know, she was not correcting these kids. I mean, she'd be up there reading her book or picking her nose or whatever she was doing. But after we start retaliating, she decided she was going to come to our house and tell on us to our mother. And that's the last thing that she wanted to do because she didn't leave with any dignity intact after my mother started to explain to her what was going on. So, as I was saying, I attended Morgan E. Norris from the first to the third grade. And in the first grade, we had this young lady named Aretha Penn come and attend our school because she was from Prince Edward County. And Prince Edward County at the time was, they were having a fallout behind the Brown versus Board of Education. So she came to our school, and I'm going to read you what it says. In an attempt to block implementation of Brown, Prince Edward County simply shut down its public schools. And as a kid, I kept a newspaper clipping of Aretha handing a bag of pennies to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. The school kids were part of a drive where they were trying to help to reopen their schools. And those schools remained closed for 5 years. 5 years. So during my fourth grade, I attended Brookville High School. One of my proudest moments was going to Brookville. So that was in the fourth grade. And when we started going to Brookville, my brother and I, we were able to ride a school bus too. And that's because of activisms by people like Mr. Isaac Ike Lewis and Mr. Simon Conquest, Mr. William Crosby, Dr. Norris, who campaigned and demanded that proper public school transportation and resources were given to the Black Lancaster County children, so that when I was ready to go to school, I would have it better than they did. So these are people that redefine how black education was going to be for the new generation. Well, new generation. So, both of my parents are the children of watermen. My dad was a self-employed waterman, and my father was born in Northumberland County. He lived in Dishley, and my mom was born in Lancaster County, and she lived in Whitestone. So, Lancaster and Northumberland still historically are fierce rivals. Now, this is the last class of Julia Rosenwald. And I'm going to see, yeah, that's my Uncle Carol, 1958, the last year for Julia Rosenwald School. And this gentleman here with the sweater, that's Dr. James E.C. Norris. And over here is some other relatives. I think it's Helen Carter and I think Jean Taylor. There are other relatives. But I just want to let you know that Rosenwald, later Central High School, and A.T. Wright, then Brookvale, doing sports in our house, oh, it would be ugly. It would be ugly because, as I say, Lancaster and Northumberland had always been rivals. But we were friendly rivals, but we were rivals. So the house that we lived, or that we later lived in, is the dividing line between the two counties is in front of our house. And I always thought of it as straddling two worlds, especially when it came to the fact that we were rivals. And you know, you got parents that are going at it and talking smack to each other, but it was great. It was really great. So the fact that they were both loyal to their schools, you know, instilled a sense of pride in us that we were of two counties. So I'm talking about the line in front of our house, but it seemed like there always was a line in my life. And growing up in segregated Northern Neck, you would see colored signs, and you experience the denial of equality and of rights. And it was just a common occurrence in my parents' lives and in my parents' lives, and without me understanding it, even though I was a young child, I was experiencing it also. And I was old enough to understand what racism was, but it really was cemented when we used to go and visit Santa Claus, which used to be in front of the Kilmarnock Town Hall. So what Santa would do, Santa wouldn't let the black kids sit on his lap. And you're going up there to tell Santa what you want for Christmas. But instead, Santa is giving you a bag of candy and giving you a hard shove in the back. Sort of like Ralphie in the Christmas Story when he put the boot and just knocked them down the slide. It was something similar to that. But what we decided to do, that we were just going to go to Santa and we were just going to snatch his candy and then also try to time the back shove so that Santa would be pushing air instead of us. And you would get in the car and we would laugh about it, but you know, it was such an eye-opener because it really defined the fact that, you know, there were lines that I couldn't cross, like going into the Ben Franklin Five and Dime and always being watched and followed, or not being able to sit at the lunch counter at People's Drugstore, or going into Lee's and being served there, or going to the doctor's office and there would be the colored signs, you know, and it was just, you know, you're trying to understand it, but there really was no understanding. So I just knew that, you know, there were lines that I wasn't supposed to cross. And then in 1968, we had freedom of choice, followed by forced integration for all of the counties of the Northern Neck. And graduating from Northumberland Public Schools system, it seemed like, again, our futures were being predetermined because of profiling. And this didn't happen just to the black students, but it was happening to the white students because I couldn't take auto mechanics or shop because I was female. Okay, I can't change oil. Okay, because I'm female. So I also, my parents weren't rich people. So the guidance counselors that we had, they never asked me what kind of plans that I had for my future. They never told me about applying for grants or what kind of scholarships that were maybe available for us. I mean, as I said, this was not only for black students, but for white students also. So, you know, to me, that was another line, but it was an economic divide here. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go into the Air Force. I'm gonna go into the military. That was a lot of people's way of trying to figure out what they was going to do with their lives. The military was the way to go. But once again, I was my plans were kind of crushed when the recruiter told me, well, no, you can't do what you want to do, which is I wanted to be a pilot. And they told me I couldn't be a pilot because I was a woman. But what they really meant was I was a black woman. But I decided I was going to go into the Air Force anyway. So that's what I did. I was planning to go to the Air Force. And then that summer, I had some relatives who told me, come to DC. Well, it was the first time I ever had a taste of freedom. And I got up there and I went, buck wow. I was like, oh no, someone not telling me that I have to go to bed at 9 o'clock. And someone telling me that I can't go to the theater. Someone telling me that I can eat pork and beans and applesauce. No, thank you. All of a sudden, you know, I had this taste of freedom. I said, no, I'm not going. I'm not going. But I must admit, I regret not going because the military, the Air Force particularly, would have probably broadened my vision just a little more, and I probably would have finished my education earlier. But, you know, it is what it is. All I can say with confidence that I had the sense of a bag of hair. So I was just a young person from the country, so that's what happens. So I moved back to Kilmarnock in 1974 because I didn't make it in Washington, D.C. I was just too naive. And after that, I went to the Peninsula in 1975, and then I moved to Richmond, Virginia in 1989. And during all of that, I had a lot of adventures. I really did. I went to school and then had really great academic achievements and honors. I got to fly that airplane. I went for a ride, and the pilot let me take the controls. So that was a real big moment for me. And then I started working in an industry that didn't have a lot of representatives like myself, which was a black Native American woman. So then in 2019, COVID-19. And I started isolating to keep myself and other people safe. And all of a sudden you're alone with yourself and you're thinking. Something that I had been doing for a long time. I mean, it's like life was busy. But all of a sudden, life slowed down, and I started thinking about my hometown, and I started thinking about I didn't really know much about my hometown because I never went anywhere. So my brothers and sister, they had children, and their children had children, and I'm sitting up here, thinking about all of their achievements, and I'm saying, okay, something is wrong here. Something is really wrong here. So I started to think that the racism that I witnessed and experienced as a young child, then as a young adult, was still present and celebrated as a privilege and a right. The president of the nation from 2016 to 2020 had opened Pandora's box, and where the dividing lines were now once again rearing its ugly head, and it was also being maintained and celebrated and encouraged, and federal mandates were being created and enforced to alter rights and to keep information and true history selected. So I had witnessed witnessed black stories being produced, and it was by non-black people, and their perspective was not correct at all. But they were asked for input, and they were asked for advice, and they would use it, but they wouldn't let you be part of the decision-making process. So they appreciated the input, and they appreciated the work ethic that was going into their projects. So I realized that I had been living in a vacuum for such a long time, and it was just, I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. I could not live in this vacuum any longer, and I had to do something about it. So I decided I was going to find out some information about my hometown, and since we were in isolation, I started calling people. I figured the phone had always been a lifeline for everybody. If you wanted to know something, you could just call a person, and if they didn't know, it would take maybe 15 minutes for them to get back with you and tell you what it is that you needed to know. But as I was thinking, I first had to assess what was it that I wanted to know, and then who would talk to me, because I knew about many people, but I didn't know many people, and the only people that I really knew were my family members or people that I had went to school with. So I didn't want to be too personal with the questions that I wanted to ask, because I needed to know if my experiences and feelings were similar to theirs. So with the support of my former employer, WCBE, which is now BPM, I was granted access to their studios, and I started doing phone interviews. And for that, I want to thank Travis Pope and Mason Mills, who gave me the support and encouragement, and especially Sean Evans for his support and training me and giving me advice in using the recording studio. So I narrowed the questions down to 12. And the questions focus on the interviewees' education from the Northern Next public school system. And I would ask questions like, what were your favorite subjects? Who were your favorite teachers? If their education was entirely with segregation, what decision did they made when the freedom of choice was made? If they were part of the forced integration, or if integration was the norm. And some of the other questions was about favorite foods and first jobs and people that had influenced them, and most importantly, their first experience with racism. So the first group of people that I interviewed were a broad spectrum of ages and backgrounds and were either from Lancaster or Northumberland County. And it was what I knew, that was home for me, Northumberland, Lancaster. But it had always been my intention to expand into all of the counties of the Northern Neck, because I know that those type of experiences were not isolated just in Northumberland and Lancaster. So I started with a suggestion from one of my classmates, William M. Carter, who told me I needed to contact Philip Haney Jr., who's the owner of Haney's Farms. And he told me to get in contact with his son, PJ. And then from that same conversation, he told me I need to get in contact with Alva Jackson, who is the owner of my Margaret's Bed and Breakfast. So, this gentleman right here, Dr. Elton Smith, who was the principal of Brookvale, my beloved Brookvale, and my beloved Dr. Smith, he was one that I knew that I wanted to talk to. Then I wanted to talk to some of my family members, like my Uncle Carol, who was one of the first black black captains of a Menhaden boat, and his younger brother Morgan, who was an outstanding athlete and scholar. And I wanted to talk to them particularly because they were part of that dying breed of generational watermen, like their father, Mr. Alonzo Curry, who, told to me by several family members, was the inventor of the crab pot. But someone stole that idea from him and they patented it, and they got rich. And the breeze just went over my grandfather's head. That's all he got. That's all he got. And he had other sons that were watermen, like my father, James, and they call him JC, and twins, Bill and Floyd, and Joe, who is a beloved business person and community leader, and the city of Richmond, or town of Richmond, of Kilmarnock, they named a children's park after him. So there's the Joe Curry Memorial Park is named after my Uncle Joe. And please, y'all, excuse me for making these mistakes. I'm so excited and I'm just a little nervous too. So thank you for bearing with me. But so those are his sons, and his oldest son, Alonzo Jr., he drowned while fishing, and his name is engraved on the Northern Neck Watermen's Memorial that is located in Reedsville on the Fisherman's Museum. So if you happen to go there, there's other relatives that's there beside Curry's. There's some hills that's on there, which is on my mom's side. So some of the other people that I asked to help me out was Captain Matthews Gaskins Jr., whose father was another generational fisherman, Captain Matthews Sonny Boy Gaskins Sr. And they used to go down to Louisiana. They would leave this area because they had a better chance of making being promoted. I mean, they were captains. They couldn't do that here in the Northern Neck, but they could do it down in Louisiana. So they were going to Louisiana to fish, something that others did, like Captain Gus Dunaway, and my mother's father, Captain Clinton Hill, and his son, Clinton Winfield, also known as CW, who lost his life while shrimping in Louisiana. So great athletes are plentiful here in the Northern Neck. And when I say plentiful, it's from now, and you can just keep going back to people like Mr. Sam Keith, who played with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and his teammates being Mr. Jackie Robinson and Mr. Roy Campanella, and Mr. Booker Taylor, who played with the Baltimore Orioles. And there was, I mean, so many men who they were trying out for all these big major league baseball teams. But let me see if y'all can see someone that looks really familiar here. Y'all see somebody that looks familiar? Uh-huh. That's my mother up there, because the women were putting it down too. Oh yes, they were putting it down. And when you think about it, women, you know, were put in boxes forever. But these women, they were playing different counties. And when you think about it, this is a segregated society, and they are traveling from town to town. And there was a tinge of danger there. I mean, you know, who knows what's going on these dark roads in the woods. But they wanted to play. They wanted to play. So, I wanted to talk to members of the Brookvale Men's 1969 State Championship Baseball team, who finally received their recognition 51 years later. 1969 they won, but 51 years later they got their recognition. So I reached out to several of the team members, including the Carter twins. Now, y'all can probably see, but oops. That's Wardell. He's the catcher, and if you see where he is, then you just go up and over. That's his twin, Moselle. He was one of the pitchers for Brookvale. So I had asked them at the ceremony when they finally received their rings, and they encouraged me and told me, yeah, this is great what you're doing, but unfortunately they both died in a car accident before I could interview them. So instead, their teammate, Jesse Davenport. Yeah, I know. Jesse Davenport, he decided he was going to let me interview him. So because I was in isolation, I started doing a lot of surfing on the internet and on Facebook. And one of the things I started noticing that, you know, other family members, like my cousin, Dr. Don Watt Curry, and my classmate, Al Stewart, a former acting secretary for labor for the United States, that they were going around the world and they were living their best lives, and they were going to places that I only wished I could have visited. So I asked them if they, you know, would agree to being interviewed, and they said yes. And I was just shocked with everybody that agreed to be interviewed by me. So I used the VPN's phone system to call everybody so that I could record and store their stories either as a WAV file or as an MP3 file. And I had this little small memory laptop, so I had to get USB drives because I was getting so much data. And I'm just going to tell you that if you decide that you want to do something like this, organization and record keeping are key. And you really need to think about having backup systems, whether it be cloud or you buy yourself a little hard drive, because it's going to be that day that you're going to be so tired and you would have erased all of this data, and all you can do is eat chunky monkey or big bags of cookies or cheeseburgers. And trust me on this, because I figure out I'm either going to cry or I'm going to eat. And as you can see, I should have cried more. I should have cried a lot more. So there was a free editing system called Audacity, and they accepted both the WAV and the MP3 format. So I later posted the edited interviews on Facebook to get an audience. And I wrote introductions to the interviews that I had edited, and I put pictures, and then I posted a shared link from my Google account. But it didn't have any music, and it was just, kind of a down and dirty thing. Even though I had edited, it was just, a plain conversation with friends that were answering some of these important questions. But immediately I started having technical problems. The interviews would freeze up. So then the listener would have to constantly refresh their page so it would come back up. And then some of my posts were deleted. And like the leprechaun of Lucky Charms, they would magically reappear. And I figured out that there was dog whistle words like sexism and racism and segregation. Somebody was reporting me. But, once they found that, the offensive truth was, had nothing to do with me, bashing anybody, Facebook would, put my post back up. But, it made me realize that I needed to find another platform that wasn't going to censor me. So the response to the interviews were, I just can't tell you how overwhelmed I was, how wonderful the responses were. So since VPM is an NPR member station and they have a transmitter in Heathville, Virginia, I said, well, I'm going to make this into a radio show. And so that became a plan. I'm going to have a radio show. And then my alternate was to create a website. So I knew I needed music and I needed a persona. So I had a long-time friend, Robert A. Hall, who offered to write music for me. And it was his first time creating music like this, for this kind of project. And I'm going to tell you that, he didn't knock the ball out of the park. He knocked it across several states. I mean, it was amazing. And the most amazing part was that we didn't communicate, but he will always have just the right piece of music just at the right time that I needed it. And it was just amazing. So since I had the blessing of parents who never admit who named me, and while my name is Pixie, I decided, well, I already have a persona. I'm going to go with that. And I created this really free-handed sketch of my logo. And he helped to conceptualize what I was trying to do. So this is what I have. This is a pixie or a fairy, and in my house I spell it F-A-E-R-I-E because I am a curry. And it's the black fairy is carrying a staff and is a blue shell hard crab tip with eagle's fairy, and this is a maverick. That's because that was one of my favorite cars. That and my Mustang and my Trooper, and all of them were in shades of blue, and all of them were named Pegasus. And that was because my parents, they had books on mythology, particularly the author Edith Hamilton. And we also would go to the drive-in movies to see Ray Harryhausen movies when the drive-in was where the Walmart is. Yeah, so that was happening. So because I was trying to get with NPR, I had to learn and adhere to the station's rules and their regulations, and I was limited to 53 minutes. And some of the interviews that I had conducted and put on Facebook, I could cut them and make them into 2 interviews because those who know me know I talk a lot. A lot. So, because I was limited to 53 minutes and I needed to make them into packages, I started asking more people for interviews. So VPM, they use a Windows editing system called Audition. And both Audition and Audacity, they both accepted the MP3 and the WAV format. And both of them are good, but it was sort of a choice of, accepting either a Volkswagen or an Audi. So I went with the Audi. So when editing those conversations forced me to determine what parts of the conversation are for the interviewer only. Because the privilege of having access to other people's feelings is a tremendous responsibility. And especially in talking to the elderly, it was important that you just let them talk. And I had to learn how to let the silence guide me. At first I would start to talk, and then they would talk, and I would just be stepping on their words. So I had to learn to let a few minutes go, because really what they was doing, they were being quiet because they was remembering. So then I started, the silence really wasn't silence. There was a lot going on here. So I used those silence to write my narrative, the voiceovers. So it was 53 minutes, but if you're going to do a project like this, I would encourage you that as much material as you can get, the better your interviews will be. So it's 53 minutes, but really in editing, that means 53 days, because it takes like forever. And each moment is important because there's placement of the music, and there's pauses, and leaving the voice of the speaker to let it be authentic. You don't want to make them sound like something that they're not. That's wrong. You're altering their voice, and it's important that you don't do that. And in editing, I found out that I use the word so. And after you hear that 1,000 times, you just want to go and drown yourself or something. And I also found out, as if y'all are finding out, that I stutter when I get nervous or excited. And I also can mangle words. And I hope some of you people know who Yoga Berra and Norm Crosby is, because I can just mangle a word much more than they can. Oh yes. And those who know me will tell you I don't know how to pronounce words very well. But then it became evident that VPM was not going to broadcast my series, even though I had been approved, but they wasn't interested in broadcasting. So Plan B became Plan A. So I started creating the website. So to me, it was a door closed, but windows opened. Windows were open because I started investigating how I could get more information, how I could flesh out the website. And I started to think about how my journey from living from Washington, D.C., then to the Lower Peninsula, and then to Richmond, that all of these were going to be part of the website. So with the addition of books and movies and my dad's writing, was a wonderful writer, and music and art and notable people and history and food, all the things that were important in my life, I started to flesh out the website. And with the help of my friend Nicholas Messiah, and once again Travis Pope, from conception on January the 7th, 2022, a Pixie from Kilmarnock.com was officially launched on my mom's birthday, September the 24th, 2022. So, I needed funds. I needed to be able to get people to help me, because all of a sudden it was overwhelming. There was a lot of information. There was a lot of things I still needed to do. So I started using this funding platforms, Kickstarter, which is all or nothing, or Indiegogo, which is a get what you get kind of situation. But because both of the fundraising campaigns, they were asking for perks, a physical prototype of what you were presenting to try to get funds, get donations for people. So from the logo that I created, Vistaprint had a template. So I was able to make these bumper stickers and these labels. And one of the things I found out is that marketing is crucial. It really is. And the development aspect of a Pixie from Kilmarnock forced me to re-examine my goals and the embracing new technology. And this is from a person who just started texting about 9 months ago. Yeah, I was one of the holdouts, but there you have it. And I also had to learn how to focus more intently about why I really wanted to do this and how to go about doing it. And being interviewed and photographed for an article in Style magazine written by this wonderful writer, Rich Brissett, and the photographer Scott Elmquist, who made me look regal. Y'all probably see the picture. You know, gave me some exposure. So presently, I'm a one-woman organization, and I have several projects that is going on. And one is that I have a video short about the first Black physician for Northumberland County and inventor, most notably the catalytic converter, Dr. Jan B. Charlton, with the assistance of the Charlton Charity family. And then Dr. Charlton's medical building still houses one of the first X-ray machines that was in the early development of that technology. So he was one of the first, not only just the first Black, but he was one of the first doctors to use that technology of an X-ray. So my plans for the future includes collaborating with the Northern Neck Hidden History Trail, and their mission is to team with families and all county historians, telling the stories of people such as Joseph J. Rohn, who is Virginia State trained as an expert in the science of soil and management and crop production, who was born in Cremlin, Westmoreland County, Virginia, who moved to the Kremlin, the USSR, in 1905 to seek racial equality, but that didn't happen. So he returned back to still the non-equity or racial divide US of A to teach students. This is the mission for the Northern Neck Hidden History Trail Project. And this gentleman here, this is Armstead S. Nickens. I want to really expand on the history for one of the black representatives serving in Reconstruction, Virginia, who is also responsible for the bridge that connects Richmond County to the mainland in Tappahannock. And once again, people who don't get their props, someone else come and get they get the glory. So I'm interested in assisting and being a part of the preservation and revitalization and or historical designation of the vibrant black businesses to encourage hey, that's all right. You know, so this is Theodore Bird's. I'm gonna call it the mall, because he had everything. He had a barber shop, he had a shoe repair, he had a gas station. It was huge. I know there was another business that he had. Oh, he had a grill. Yeah, he had a lunch counter. And this is Bill Gustus. This was a big recreational area in Northumberland County. This is Rice's. Rice's, it was used to also be called Hatches. Yeah, these was some of Cosby, famous Cosby, the fried chicken king with that sauce. I only heard about it. I never got a chance to eat it. But I mean, it's famous. And this is a recreation center. So this is used to house the League of Negro Women's Business Leaders. And I'm just hoping that this is something that's going to come back, that black women business leaders will come to the forefront. And one of the other things that I want to do, I want to help with the restoration of old St. John's Cemetery. And I also want to be part of the campaign of returning our beloved native drink, Northern Neck Ginger Ale. You know, particularly to the original site in Montrose, where the artesian water was a major component of that drink. And it could really, the restoration of that product could be a major industry for our region, and it could also just bring, you know, more employment. So, black education, yes. All right. That little dude right there with those socks, that's my dad. No, it can't be. That's what, yeah, well, see, if you can't use it on the screen. So, okay, I'm right under him. Where that little spot is, and that little man who got his head up so high with his hands around his knees, yeah, that's my dad. That's my little boo. Yeah, and there's several of his siblings, and there's several people in there that were great educators. They were great businessmen from that humble beginning. Those kids, they did great things for the community. So that's where Jones Run is right now in Dishley. It's privately owned. Just like Morgan E. Norris is now someone's home. And Anna to Jeans, which was part of the Jeans Foundation, is now, I think it's called Bayshore Baptist Church. And another Jeans is Mount Jeans, which is now Lancaster School Board. And Holly Grade, that is a community center and a museum site. And the slide that you saw was Central. Well, they demolished Central in the middle of the night, like thieves will be. They came and they tore the school down. And they took all of the memorabilia that was in that building and threw it in the dumpster. Didn't give anybody a chance to recover our history. I have a couple of bricks. And as soon as I heard about it, I came home and I went across the school that I went to, and I got a couple of bricks at home that's from Central. So, and I want to say too that Brookvale is presently an elementary school, but I think they are going to tear that down. They're going to build a new elementary. So, you know, it's what happens to black schools. They close them down, they rename them, they repurpose them, and they're forgotten. So here are some other schools that are part of the Julia Rosenwald School in Northumberland. This is Avalon, which is a part of the Northumberland public bus garage area. This beautiful school, Hygiena, which is on, all of these schools, by the way, is on Route 360. This one is behind the Dollar General on 360, as is Julia Rosenwald, which is one of the schools that's being preserved, the Julia Rosenwald School Foundation of Northumberland County, Inc., which has its president as Mrs. Murray Jackson, and one of the volunteers to help to restore it is Mr. Sam Key. 86-year-old Mr. Sam Key climbing up on the roof and replacing he graduated from there, so he's really passionate about keeping his school. And this map show you just how many Julia Rosenwald schools is in Northumberland County. That's a lot of schools. And something has to happen to keep these schools from disappearing. It's really up to us to try to help with that. So I'm still trying to get more interviews, hopefully with assistance from other historical societies and the libraries and individuals that have stories to tell. And I want to connect with the Native people who understandably are reluctant to open up to strangers. So encouraging people to tell their stories in their own way, and the time to tell it is important in conducting an interview. So, and I also want to get another pilot certification so I can legally use my drone for aerial footage of the next beautiful coastal region. And skills that I thought I had lost, I found that I hadn't. And the mindset that I brought to projects for other people, I'm using for my own success. And the fear of appearing publicly and speaking before public, I have to overcome because I believe in the stories that people are telling me. And my mindset is to be pliable to every situation, learn to be thick-skinned and receptive to criticism, and learning to embrace no as not as anything personal, and knowing that when you green, you grow, when you right, you rot. And it's something that, you know, I need to keep with, you know, with me. So one of the things that I did, I was seeked out a mentor, and Dr. Here I go mangling somebody's name, Dr. Chinook I. Anson. He's a lecturer with the Richard T. Robinson School of Media and Culture, and he's also one of the voices of NPR's sponsorship messages. And since 2016, he has tracked and delivered underwriting copy for newscasts and digital download. And he is also professor of African American Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University, and is the director of community media at VPM and the Institute for the Contemporary Art Community Media Center, which provides free workshops and training to anyone who wants to get into podcasts. So I went to him for guidance because I wanted to do a Black History Month series, and he suggested that I get with the local churches. So with that, with the assistance of the Northern Neck Baptist Association staff, Reverend Jannard Reed and Joy Corkroot, and churches Willie Chapel, Beulah, and especially Calvary Baptist and their staff, Reverends Rose Curry, Ulysses Turner, Samuel Kane, and their congregation, and Eric Lee of Lee Media Productions, and Roberta A. Fountain, who was my video editor, a 5-day production entitled the Northern Neck Black History Makers Program, featuring some of the elders from Northumberland and Lancaster, like the people I had interviewed, Dr. Smith, Mr. Key, Dr. Norris, my uncles Morgan and Carol. I created this series called The Heroes Amongst Us, and I'm hoping that it's going to become a annual event. And people like this man right here, Dr. Smith, and I think Dr. Smith now is like 96 years old, and he is still as sharp as a tack. And I'm going to give y'all a chance to read this, because this was the speech that he gave to the last class of Brookvale. I mean, his inspiration, that was 1968, and it still holds true. He is full of encouragement and support for all of the students, and he has been forever to this day. So I know I'm running out of time, so here goes, y'all. So I couldn't say anything about the Northern Neck without mentioning the military. And you will notice if you drive around this city of Richmond, in fact, when you came in, you probably saw pictures of people who had served in the military and they're no longer with us. And for me, there's a flag in the town that has a picture of a 21-year-old Marine private whose remains are still in the on the mountains of Vietnam, and that's my Uncle Hubbard Curry. But this gentleman right here, he is phenomenal. I think Cousin John is almost 100 years old, and he, well, taught the pilots at Tuskegee. But not only that, he supplied the hub streets for the vaccine for polio. He's just phenomenal. He's there are no words. So ooh, I think I read up something. Well, I'll just stay here. So I wanted to say that there are so many heroes amongst us, you know, our uncles, our aunts, our grandparents, our great-grands. There are family records to examine and memorial headstones to read. You should be sitting on the porch or in the backyard with relatives on land that has been family owned for generations. And so many of these stories will be lost if someone doesn't preserve them. And it is a responsibility that the past not be forgotten, so that the future will have a record of what has been accomplished and achieved, particularly when it comes to Black, Indigenous people of color. And we must not allow true history to be whitewashed, nor ignored, or have the stories to be told by others using their interpretation and from their perspectives without input from the participants. And history can be ugly and painful. For example, I was talking about the Carter twins. Well, they were men of the community. And when I say that, they gave a lot to the community. They did a lot for the community, and they did it quietly and with grace. And they didn't ask for any accolades or anything. But to diminish their team's achievements by the posted commemoration signs that's posted on the 3 borders that take you into Lancaster, welcoming people to the Lancaster County, that has depicts the Black Brookvale High School achievement painted in the colors of the white Lancaster High School red and white instead of the Brookville blue and orange. You know, that's an indication that change is still much needed. But also, history can be beautiful. Healing can take place because a balm can be applied, a remedy can be found. And if you know the root of the pain. So knowing your past gives you a better understanding of who you are and what you can do to make things better, especially for the next generation. Like being featured in the Rappahannock record. Not in the colored section, no more colored section, but in the newspaper. That was an achievement for me, and having a platform to allow Black history and truth to be presented, that's another achievement. So I'm going to read something to you all. So this is a quote. Some advice from an old memorist. Take it. My advice to you, young people, is to start asking questions of your elders about family history and who did what, when, and why, and don't stop until you get answers, because though you much too cool to be interested in family history now, someday you will want to know these things, and by that time they all will be dead. Okay? Read that paragraph over a couple of times to yourself and then go do it. I'm trying to finish a memoir, and I realized how much I don't know, and I was too busy caravanning about as my elders began taking the long walk, and I didn't sit down and ask for the story. My elders were self-effacing Midwesterners brought up not to talk about personal things, and they kept many secrets from me, such as how did the men fall in love with the women and vice versa, they being such righteous folks and sensible and circumspect. Mother came from a family of 13, dad from 8, and when I knew them, they were all settled in comfortable marriages. And what I want to know is what transpired when they were infatuated and savoring sensuous moments and looking forward to throwing caution to the wind. It happened even in cautious Christian families like mine. I see the pictures of my youthful aunts in their white summer dresses sashaying around the lakes of Minneapolis, and I sense adventure and lightheartedness, not weary mothers I knew them as. I know that my parents met on July the 4th, 1931, as teenagers at a picnic at the Keeler Farm and were crazy about each other, but I wish I asked them for more details. He was a farm boy, she was a city girl, slender and shy, and they didn't marry until 6 years later, it being the Depression and all. But what happened in those 6 years? I grew up with two parents who held hands and flirted with each other about all their long lives, and I'm grateful. And I want to know how come, and there's nobody left to ask. I write about my life, the lost world of hitchhiking, which I knew as a kid and got picked up by angry, half-drunk men who raged against the government, their bosses, their army commanders, their wives, and I got a view of life you couldn't get in school or from the newspaper. It's gone. And so are the downtown department store of Minneapolis, the smells and bells, the ladies with white gloves who ran the elevators. I went to a state university back when tuition was so cheap you could pay for your education with a part-time low-wage job, no debt, no need to ask your dad for money. And so you were free to make impractical plans, such as become a writer of fiction. I came from a fundamentalist family that was weary of higher education, and I plunged into campus life. And before I knew it, I had 4 close friends, Larry and Barry and Murray and Arnie, all of them Jewish. I did an early morning radio show back when people listened to radio religiously before YouTube and Google and Intertube and Bugle and iPod and Peapod and all the other platforms. It's all interesting, but it's the love stories that a person craves. You want to know that you are descended from passionate irresponsibility, not a business arrangement or a science experiment, but two people mysteriously drawn to each other. My mother's parents, William and Marion, courted in Glasgow, and she was 4 months pregnant when they married. Their brood of 13 children testifies to their feelings for each other. Dad's parents, James and Dora, were 20 years apart in age. He was an old bachelor on the school board, and she was a teacher. She boarded with him and his sister. He came to school and helped her clean blackboards and clap erasers, and he kissed her, and they ran off and got married. They came home in a buggy, and he left the horses standing in harness all night, the reins on the ground, as he carried Dora into the house, his sister having disembarked for a house up the road. It's good to know these things. Sit your people down and ask questions. The secret of investigating journalism is ask questions and keep asking. People want to spill the beans, they just need some warming up. Apply the heat. You will thank me for this someday. I won't be around, but you're welcome. Garrison Keeler. I challenge all of you to get out of your recording devices. Use the technology that is available that anyone can use. Visit and talk to your elders, and not just your family elders, but your church elders, your old school teachers, peoples whose yards and home you invaded and broke bread with, and find out the greatness that runs within your vein. Know about the hardships, the wins, the glory from your own history that makes you a bold and an adventurous person. And for me, short, ampler, size, formerly a redhead, gap-toothed, funny named, Blackfoot native woman with a stock Irish surname, all attributes inherited from ancestors who also gave me courage, creativity, a willingness a determination to seek out the truth, a fighter, all the things that make me proud to say I am a Pixie from Kilmarnock. I want to thank you all for supporting me, and thank you all for listening. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pixie. You said it so well that we are a historical society of people. We can't do it alone. Everybody out here can become an amateur historian, an oral historian, and like she said, there's, with your iPhones and with Zoom and everything now, we really can't easily start recording all of these stories, or find your kids and grandkids and get them involved. And then we can send it to the experts who can make something out of these files, raw data. But let's get out there and start saving these stories, because so many people we hear from are interested in the last 50, 75, 100 years, and that information is still in the community memory. So these stories and interviews are so important. Thank you, Pixie.